In this video, there's going to be a dialogue between a male and female AI, and they're going to be discussing the night I met two angels, or the night two angels came to me, something of that nature, in a very, very bizarre, exceedingly real, beyond measure, supernatural experience. And the angels gave me a subliminal message, which I never worked out until a few weeks later when I was presented with a brilliant synchronicity, which was really starting to begin to look and feel very, very spooky and weird, because it's like the cosmos spirit was actually laying things before me, creating a trail, like an Easter egg hunt with clues here and there. It really was like that for 14 years. And it's not really finished now, only it was much more intense in the beginning. Now, so I'm going to play this dialogue, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can move that. I don't know how I can move this. Strange. Well, you don't need to see my face. Get rid of the camera. No, let's get rid of that. So let's see what they have to say then.
I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine waking up in the dead of night, but you aren't in your bed. You don't even have a body.
Right. Just completely bodiless.
Exactly. You are just pure consciousness suspended in this incredibly vivid technicolor blue sky. And you're staring down at this magnificent marble pedestal. Resting on it are two stunningly detailed angels, and you feel this unimaginable peace.
But as you look closer, there's a catch, right?
Yeah, a huge catch. One of those angels is missing something absolutely essential.
And that missing element, it just kind of shatters the illusion of perfection. It tells you immediately that something in this pristine environment is fundamentally out of balance.
It really does. And that unsettling realization is exactly where we're starting our deep dive today. We're getting into Aaron Berry's book, A Journey to the Self, spiritually awakening to the supernatural cosmos.
It's such a fascinating read.
It is. Our mission today is to take this hyper-detailed spiritual vision he had, decode it using the psychology of Carl Jung, and really unpack this universal internal war it sparked. I mean, the ultimate conflict, the battle between our ego and our spirit.
Yeah, and regardless of your personal beliefs in, the supernatural or angelic visions, Barry's experience serves as this remarkable psychological roadmap.
Right.
It illustrates how the human mind processes deep internal imbalances and how we survive that agonizing transition known as the dark night of the soul. Ultimately, it asks you to figure out who or what is actually driving the vehicle of your life.
So to understand this profound shift the author went through, we have to kind of step inside the visceral reality of the vision itself. He describes his physical body and his ego being fast asleep, but his consciousness turns on like a light.
Like a switch was flipped.
Yeah. He describes himself as pure awareness, completely devoid of any physical form, just experiencing this blissful stillness in the heavens.
And the absence of the ego in this initial state is so key.
Yeah.
When the ego is offline, there's no anxiety, no identity attached to a body, no fear of the future. It's just, pristine, immaculate awareness.
Just totally present.
Exactly. Completely present.
So from this vantage point in the sky, he looks down and sees this monumental structure. It's a magnolia-colored marble pedestal. He says it's about 8 feet wide with smooth, beveled edges, and it rises up from the earth for 10 miles.
10 mile high. I mean, that specificity is a major signal.
How so?
Well, in typical dreams, the mind paints with broad, fluid strokes, rooms shift, architecture changes.
Right, things are fuzzy.
Yeah, exactly. But when the subconscious constructs something this rigid and precise, it usually signifies a structural, undeniable truth within the psyche. It demands attention.
That makes a lot of sense. And lying face down on this pedestal with their feet closest to him are two naked angels. They look to be about 20 years old, one male, one female.
Perfect human bodies.
Yeah, beautifully tan bronze skin, long, wavy fair hair flowing over their shoulders. They're looking at each other, but they're also smiling up at the author with perfect, eternal contentment. He says the viewing angle is like looking out of a two-story building down into your garden.
Which creates a very specific dynamic. It's intimate, but observational. He's positioned above them, detached, yet they are fully aware of him. They're actively acknowledging his presence.
But the crucial detail is the anatomy. The author observes the male angel and sees these beautiful bronze-colored muscular wings. He says they're velvet-like.
He even notices the small muscles.
Yeah, the small muscles making up the feathered, overlapping parts of the wings. Soft, smooth, perfectly groomed for flight. But then he looks at the female angel. She has absolutely no wings whatsoever. She's entirely grounded.
And at the time, in the dream state, he notes that he didn't think anything of it. He just observed their perfection. But that missing element is the entire crux of the experience. It's the message waiting to be deciphered.
Which brings up the architecture of the mind itself. Why would a spiritual vision or the subconscious mind render the specific velvet-like texture of the male's wing muscles, but leave the female completely devoid of flight?
It's wildly asymmetrical.
Right. A vision this strange and specific demands translation. Barry searches for a way to decode this and finds the key in Carl Jung, specifically Jung's concept of archetypes and the collective unconscious.
Yeah, Jung is the perfect cipher for this.
Let's ground that concept for a second. We hear collective unconscious tossed around a lot. It feels like we're talking about a shared psychological DNA, like a vast inherited library of human experiences and symbols we all have access to.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. Over evolutionary timescales, humanity has encountered the same fundamental forces: the mother, the trickster, the hero. These forces left imprints in our deep psyche.
The archetypes.
Exactly, Jung called them archetypes. Primal templates we intuitively understand. Angels and celestial beings are deeply embedded in this shared library as messengers of a higher truth.
And Jung zeroed in on two very specific archetypes that unlock this vision, the anima and the animus.
Yes. Jung proposed that the psyche is inherently androgynous at its deepest levels. The animus is the masculine facet residing within the female psyche.
In the anima.
The anima, which is central here, is the feminine facet residing within the masculine psyche. Jung emphasized that she isn't just some vague concept of femininity. She is an autonomous, functioning personality within the unconscious.
What does she represent, practically?
She represents relatedness, empathy, intuition, and connection to the deeper self.
So when Barry applies this framework, everything clicks. He realizes the wingless female angel is not a random celestial being. She is a direct mirror reflection of his own anima.
And her lack of wings is a reflection of his own life choices up to that point.
Right, because he does some intense self-excavation here. He describes himself as a highly out-of-balance, testosterone-driven macho egotist.
That's his phrase, yeah.
He had spent his youth flying all over the world, completely driven by his ego, cramming in as many intense physical experiences as possible.
His ego was the sole pilot. And because he dedicated his entire existence to outward ambition and physical mastery, his feminine spirit, his anima, had been entirely neglected.
She was still compassionate, still smiling up at him with love in the vision, but she was grounded. Her wings had been clipped by his relentless, ego-driven lifestyle. She had no freedom to elevate him spiritually.
This realization is massive for him. He interprets the vision as a subliminal intervention from his higher self, or God, a visceral alert that his internal ecosystem is fundamentally failing.
See, I do have to push back a little on the mechanics of this, though.
Oh, how so?
Well, if this is a critical message from God or the higher self, why make it a complex riddle? Why require him to wake up, live with this confusing image, and eventually stumble upon a Carl Jung textbook just to figure out what it means?
You're wondering why not just send a direct message?
Yeah. Why not a burning bush that says, hey, balance your life? If your internal ecosystem is failing, shouldn't the alarm bell be obvious?
It seems counterintuitive, I agree, but it actually points to the brilliant defense mechanisms of the human mind. Think about the conscious ego, especially an ego that Barry describes as a king and conqueror.
The ego is a fortress.
An absolute fortress.
Yeah.
If the message from the higher self was literal, say, a booming voice saying, you need to be more nurturing, the ego would instantly deploy its defenses. It would rationalize it away. I don't have time for that. I have goals.
So the ego actively filters out direct threats to its authority.
Precisely. The deep psyche speaks in symbols and archetypes because imagery bypasses the stubborn rational guards of the ego. A profound symbol like a wingless angel resonates emotionally before the ego can analyze and reject it.
It sneaks right past the firewall.
It plants a seed deep in the unconscious.
The author even notes that if he hadn't figured out this specific riddle, his internal guardians would have kept sending symbols until he finally paid attention. Which makes me think about how this applies to you, the listener, right now.
Absolutely. The modern parallel is striking.
We might not be flying around the world as macho egotists, but modern hustle culture, the constant need to optimize our time, the relentless scrolling, that hypervigilant state is heavily ego-driven.
It's very easy to see how modern life is constantly clipping the wings of our own internal anima, suppressing that quiet intuition. We reward the ego for producing results, while the anima is left grounded.
But once Barry actually decodes the symbol, the intellectual exercise is over. Realizing half your soul is subdued triggers a massive internal earthquake. It thrusts him into what he calls the dark night of the soul.
Realizing you are out of balance is one thing. Actually changing the power dynamic inside your own head is a war.
And it's a war of succession. Let's talk about the incumbent ruler, the ego. It's been running the show for decades.
The ego has a massive zest for adventure. We tend to revere our egos because they help us navigate the world and achieve our ambitions. But when the spirit begins to awaken, the power structure is threatened.
It feels very much like the difference between a device's local operating system and its connection to the cloud.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Think about it. The ego is the local OS. It's fantastic at managing the battery, storing files, dealing with immediate threats. It thinks it is the entire universe of the device. But then the spirit comes online, and suddenly you are connected to the infinite cloud.
And the scope is exponentially larger.
Exactly. The local OS looks at this massive network and realizes it's about to be overwritten.
That captures the tension perfectly. Barry writes that the ego realizes there is a bigger, better produced show in town. The new spiritual horizons make the old physical adventures seem hollow.
So the ego panics.
It completely panics. Because the local operating system is terrified of losing its primary status, it fights back with intense vigor to maintain its grip on the carnal flesh.
So what are the tactics here? How does the ego actually fight back when it feels the spirit expanding?
It uses the tools it has mastered over lifetime: anxiety, false urgency, deception. When the spirit tries to pull the individual towards stillness, the ego generates a synthetic sense of panic.
Like plunging the person into a distraction loop.
Yes, or creating an obsession with a career milestone. Yeah. Or triggering addictive behaviors. It tries to convince you that if you surrender control to this quiet spirit, your physical life will collapse. It shrinks in size, but it becomes highly manipulative.
It's like the ego is a cocky middle management boss who's been running the branch office his whole life. Suddenly, the actual CEO, the spirit, walks in. The boss is terrified of losing his corner office, so he starts sabotaging the branch to prove he's still needed.
That is exactly it. The conqueror becomes a saboteur.
It's such an irony. The ego thrives on pushing boundaries and epic adventures, but it's absolutely terrified of the ultimate adventure, the expansion of the self beyond the physical world.
It clings desperately to the known, which forces us to look at how the spirit responds.
Right. What does the CEO do?
Well, the spirit is the true title owner of the individual's destiny. But because it is inherently gentle, it refuses to fight a dirty war. It does not engage with the ego's anxiety-driven tactics.
So if it doesn't fight back, how does it establish its authority?
It communicates through contrast. The spirit establishes its claim by stripping the joy out of the ego's old conquests. You achieve the goal the ego set, and the spirit ensures you feel a profound, quiet emptiness afterward.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it provides deep flashes of intuition or synchronicities that the ego cannot logically explain. The text says the spirit simply lays its claim at the feet of the ego, makes its presence known, and then retreats to sit it out.
It just sets the boundary and waits. It lets the local OS throw error codes and drain its battery, knowing that eventually the system has to yield.
But that waiting period, that transition, is the dark night of the soul.
Because you're caught between two operating systems. The old conquests feel hollow, but the new reality is vast and terrifying.
The internal friction is agonizing. But an internal war cannot sustain itself forever. After navigating this intense friction, the author finds a way for these two titans to coexist. A peace treaty is formed.
See, when people hear about spiritual awakenings, there's this common assumption that the goal is ego death, that we're supposed to kill the ego entirely and just float through life with no drive, totally detached.
But that is not what happens here. And that is a crucial distinction. The ego is never destroyed, it is repurposed. To explain this new internal paradigm, Barry draws on Ian McGilchrist's concept of the master in his emissary.
McGilchrist looks at the hemispheres of the brain, right? The right hemisphere sees the infinite context, that's the master. The left hemisphere breaks things down and manipulates the physical world, that's the emissary.
Applied to this spiritual struggle, the dynamic maps perfectly. The spirit is the master. It holds the vision and the connection to the divine. The ego, after exhausting itself in the dark night, accepts its rightful role as the emissary.
The local OS realizes it doesn't need to run the whole network, it just needs to manage the hardware. The author states he reaches a point where the ego and the spirit actually become the best of friends.
By dividing their territory evenly like a cosmic yin and yang,
What does that truce actually look like in our daily lives, practically speaking?
the ego is given strict, respected jurisdiction over the physical, carnal needs of the body.
Sure.
You still need your ego to pay the bills, to protect yourself from danger, to organize your logistics. We require Caesar to survive in a physical reality.
But the ego no longer dictates the ultimate purpose of your life.
Exactly. They no longer poke their noses into each other's business. The text summarizes this beautifully with the biblical quote, "Give unto Caesar that which belongs to Caesar, and give unto God that which belongs to God."
We give the ego what belongs to the physical self, and we give the spirit what pertains to the eternal. That takes a wildly supernatural vision of angels on a 10-mile high pedestal and grounds it into a highly practical operating system for daily life.
It really does.
When you look at your own internal board of directors, it forces a real audit. Who is sitting in the CEO chair of your life right now? Is it the loud, conquering ego generating false urgency, or is it the patient, gentle spirit? It's fascinating how recognizing one suppressed element, that wingless anima, initiates a complete restructuring of the self.
It is a profound restructuring.
Okay.
But Barry leaves us with one final lingering concept that pushes this entire journey into much deeper philosophical territory.
What's that?
Later in the book, while reflecting on this balance, he notes that without perception, there is no reality. Opposites are the absolute requirement for anything to exist.
So experience requires contrast.
Exactly. If we lack the capacity for pain, we could never map pleasure. Light requires dark. The masculine requires the feminine, and the ego requires the spirit. The friction between opposites creates our reality.
Which opens up a massive question. We just talked about the ultimate goal being this peace treaty, where ego and spirit are perfectly balanced like yin and yang. But if the friction between opposites is what creates our reality, what happens to us when we finally achieve perfect, unmoving internal balance?
That is the provocation. Once the war between the ego and spirit is entirely resolved, does the need for this physical, carnal world simply dissolve?
If the local OS and the cloud are in perfect sync with zero friction, maybe the simulation just turns off. Maybe you just wake up on the dead of night as pure, bodiless consciousness suspended in a technicolor blue sky, staring down at a marble pedestal. Definitely something to think about the next time you feel that internal tug of war.
So for those of you that are still here, I'm going to be speaking more along these lines of these supernatural experiences that I've encountered and questioning them and trying to work out what on earth is going on. Now, it's been 17 years since that happened, and it's just as fresh with me today as it was then, and so it's very, very curious. That was a very good discussion, debate, analysis, exchange, whatever we want to call it. It covered quite a lot, and it incorporated, facets of my learnt knowledge from psychology and Carl Jung and archetypes and all that sort of stuff, which of course is immense in its own right. But getting a bit of a handle on these things is paramount if we are ever going to comprehend even a little what this human experience is about. So, because I don't have too much confidence that I'm speaking to anyone really at this stage, maybe a couple, I'll say more in other videos.